Now, News 13's Political Edge presents the same-sex marriage debate with your host, Greg Lagerquist.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of News 13 live at 5:30, a special live debate on the referendum question 1, same-sex marriage in Maine. I am Greg Lagerquist. Our debate will proceed without commercial interruption for the next half an hour, featuring a representative from each side of question 1. Matt McTighe represents the vote yes side from the group Mainers United for Marriage. You'll see him on the right-hand side of your screen. And Carroll Conley represents the vote no side from the group Protect Marriage Maine on the left-hand side of your screen. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Well, we will have a chance to answer a series of questions coming up. There will be rebuttal and discussion time as well to explore the differences you have on these important issues. And of course, we do know that there are differences on these important issues as well. We then will have closing statements at the end of the debate. We also do have some brief opening statements, so we want to get to those right now. Based on our coin flip, we will begin with Carroll Conley. He is from the vote no side. And again, you will have 1 minute for an opening statement.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you, WGME, for the opportunity to share our message. Probably one of the most common questions that I've been asked over the past few months of this campaign is, what will happen if Mainers decide to redefine marriage? And we can't predict that. So the best thing we can do is look at states and countries like us that have already made this decision and look at the collateral damage. The fact is that there have been a trampling of religious rights and individual religious rights. Parental rights have been ignored, and there's been a chilling effect upon First Amendment speech, with adoptions agencies being closed, and individuals who have spoken up have found themselves in a conflict where they've been either fined or fired or threatened with legal action against them. This doesn't sound like a live and let live proposition. Those that are proposing that we redefine marriage are doing so, and they're framing the issue in a way that the only way that you can prove that you don't hate somebody is by asking us to dismantle the basic building block of civilization. We disagree with this. In so doing, we don't think it's necessary to also redefine the idea of tolerance. So we believe that it's important as we go tonight to say that it's important for us now to not redefine marriage and weaken it, but to strengthen and promote it.
Mr. Conley, thank you so much. And Matt McTighe, you will have 1 minute for an opening statement as well.
Well, thank you so much, Greg. It's just a pleasure to be here and have an opportunity to talk about what voting yes on marriage will mean for all families. And I just want to be clear, this initiative will do two things. It will, number one, allow all loving, committed couples in Maine to obtain a civil marriage license, that actual act of going into a town clerk and getting that marriage license that all couples, gay or straight, would have to obtain to be legally recognized as being married in the eyes of their state. But the other thing it would do is add new protections to Maine law to strengthen religious freedom, to make sure that no church or clergy would ever be forced to go against their religious beliefs. We believe very much in religious freedom, and there are many faith denominations here in Maine that support the freedom to marry. Nothing will change for those churches on either side. Both will be protected, and in fact, their freedoms will be strengthened by this initiative if voters vote yes on November 6th. But more than anything, this is about the actual friends and family members and neighbors and loving, committed couples that are already living beside us here in Maine. There are tens of thousands of gay and lesbian people here in Maine and thousands of couples that are already living here. We want to make sure that all of them have the freedom to marry.
Well, thank you very much. That is their opening statements from both sides on this important issue. We want to get right to the questions. There does seem to be one thing that both sides agree on. That's that the word marriage does matter. In fact, it's in the title of both of their campaigns. The yes side says marriage is about civil rights and respecting committed couples, all committed couples, in a way that goes beyond even a so-called civil union. The no side says this is an effort to fundamentally redefine a word and a concept that they argue is literally sanctified. Now, please debate this question. Why marriage? Why not a civil union? Why not try to extend legal rights usually associated with marriage to same-sex couples through some other legal means? And since we began the opening statements with Mr. Conley, we're going to be in this question with Mr. McTighe. To you, you have 1 minute to respond.
Sure, thanks, Greg. Yeah, actually, this is a really important question. We get this a lot. But the fact of the matter is, we actually agree with our opponents that marriage is probably the strongest, most stabilizing bond that society can confer on any couple to say that they're recognized in the eyes of their community and the eyes of the state. Marriage itself is a protection, and it's much stronger and much more important than just a laundry list of rights and benefits. It's one of the most stabilizing forces that any community can offer to ensure that couples and families are made stronger. But again, we're talking about civil marriage here. This is actually the act of going in to be able to have the freedom to obtain a marriage license, which is something that's issued by the state, We're not talking about religious marriage here, and we're certainly not talking about imposing any beliefs on any churches that disagree with marriage because of their own religious teachings. We're talking about civil marriage and the act of being able to go and get married in the eyes of your community and be legally recognized. But more than that, we're talking about that commitment, that stabilizing bond that marriage means so much to so many families. Nobody grows up thinking about having a civil union or a domestic partnership. People grow up thinking about being married.
Thank you so much. And to you, Mr. Conley, you have 1 minute to respond to the question as well.
Marriage is that very timeless, universal, special union, and it has been the building block of civilization for thousands of years, for various cultures and various religions for that matter. So it is very important, and that's why we ask folks to examine the potential consequences of looking at that. Civil rights are a part of that, and when you talk about civil unions, it is a moot point because it has been discussed, and that debate has really pretty much come and gone. So when we look at the role of government in marriage, it recognizes and creates a special class of couples because it believes it is the best opportunity for its next generation of young people to be raised and to be successful. And so that's why we believe this is so important. Matt talked about the idea of what couples can do in regard to insurance and adoption and things like that. And we've settled that here in Maine through our domestic partner registry. And we believe that Mainers have shown their fairness. And if there are other issues that come up that we believe need to be looked at, I think Mainers will be fair, and we can do that through the legislative process without redefining marriage.
Let's go ahead and explore this a little bit. Mr. McTighe, let's throw it back at you a little bit. He's saying, look, there are ways to do this. You've said that that's not everything, though.
Well, because again, marriage is so much more than just that list of rights and benefits. If that were the case, there wouldn't be a marriage industry in this country. There wouldn't be this idea that everybody grows up, dreaming about, having that marriage, being able to stand up in front of their friends and family and be actually, have that marriage that means so much. It is so much more than just a list of rights and benefits. If that were the case, everybody would just go into their town clerk's office and get that marriage license. But it is more. It means so much to so many families. And again, these are people who are already our friends, our family, our neighbors, and they're living right here in Maine. Many of them are already living in these couples, and many of them are raising children. Yes, it would provide additional protections. Yes, it would make sure that those families are, get the rights and protections that come with marriage. But it's so much more than that. It is the most stabilizing bond society can offer and can confer on any couple to show that they are together and that they are willing to make that lifelong commitment. We're not trying to change marriage. We're trying to join marriage.
How about that, Mr. Conley? The idea that this isn't redefining marriage. He seems to be saying that he believes it's actually expanding that existing definition of marriage to more people. How would you respond to that concept?
Sure. The proponents of same-sex marriage say that they want to just include or expand the definition of marriage, but government recognizes marriage. It doesn't create it, and marriage, frankly, predates historically that. And so the government then has a role to determine who can and who cannot marry. And Matt and his side talk about marriage equality, but it's not just about loving, committed couples. The government doesn't care about loving, committed couples. It cares about its next generation of young people that are being raised, its next generation of citizens. And so right now, I can't marry someone that's already married to somebody else, no matter how much I love them. I can't marry 2 or 3 people. The government has already decided that back in 1877 with the Supreme Court. I can't marry a close blood relative. Uncle can't marry his nephew. There's reasons and minors and all those. So the government does have a right to determine that it's something more than just the loving or the emotions or how adults feel about each other.
And I'll give you a chance to respond to what he just said if you'd like.
Well, again, I would just reiterate what I've been saying. This act, this initiative, the Citizens Initiative, would just allow every couple to go into that town clerk's office and obtain a civil marriage license. All the things that Carroll's talking about are distractions meant to take people away from what is at the core of marriage. It is that stabilizing bond. It is that commitment. It's that idea of meeting someone and having the freedom to say that I want to marry that person, I want to stand up in front of my friends and family and commit to this one person. And allowing it for all loving, committed couples here in Maine is something that would actually strengthen the institution of marriage. All families will be made stronger if everyone has the freedom to marry.
And last word, since he started this topic, let's go ahead and finalize it with you. Last word on this topic.
Again, we believe marriage is so much more than just how 2 people feel about each other. There's so many more implications than that. This is not a live and let live proposition. If Matt and those that want to propose this redefinition of marriage would allow the individuals that have a deep deeply seated religious conviction about embracing this definition of marriage, it might be a tenable proposition, but they want to silence every voice and force people to embrace this as well.
Well, I think we can continue that discussion right now. In fact, on our next question, it's based on some TV ads that have been running from both sides involving claims that legalizing same-sex marriage could have some sort of impact in our schools. Now, for the folks at home, here's a sample of one ad from each side on this issue.
If gay marriage happens here, schools could teach that boys can marry boys.
After Massachusetts redefined marriage, local schools taught it to children in 2nd grade, including the school our son attended.
When it comes to same-sex marriage, we want our children to know that all loving, committed couples should be able to get married.
What we do in a school is no substitute for what happens at home. That's where family values come in. That's where core values come in.
No law is going to change the core values we teach our kids here at home.
Well, there you go. Two ads with very different views on this issue. So here's the question. What, if any, impact would legalizing same-sex marriage have in our schools? And we will begin this question with Carroll Conley from the Vote No side.
You know, I've had the opportunity to debate a couple times against Mary Bernardo, and Mary's a very, very effective attorney and does a good job. And I believe Mary is a Thurgood Marshall fellow. And it was Thurgood Marshall who said that some will obey the law, but others will be converted by it. And to think that we could have a major public policy change like this, which is significant, and not have any effect on the classroom. When we look at those examples of what happened in Massachusetts and other places where parents were told, no, you cannot take your child out of this classroom no matter what you feel about it. You cannot have prior notice. The Judge Wolf, who actually gave that decision in the Parker case, said that the very reason for the authority that they had as a school system to do that was because same-sex marriage became the law in Massachusetts. And that's the First District Supreme Court. So we believe that also could have effect in any other state in New England where that takes place.
And Matt McTighe, you have 1 minute to respond to this question as well.
Sure. This is almost a carbon copy of an ad that they ran 3 years ago in 2009. It's no more true today than it was back then. 4 different newspapers across the state today, in a nonpartisan truth check column, went through point by point and refuted the claims made in the ad that's currently running, put up by our opponents. But the fact of the matter is, the ad and this conversation, you know, Carroll's points just there, missed the entire point. Values are taught at home. The core values that parents want to pass on to their children. Look, children are going to be exposed to things the minute they walk out the door, whether it's in a school, whether it's on TV, whether it's with their friends, whether it's on the sports teams that they play on. They're going to hear things, they're going to be exposed to things. It's up to parents. It's the responsibility of parents to teach the core values that they want to pass on to the next generation at home. When they hear things, they can talk about them as a family. School curriculums are set at the local level. That's why we have school boards. So this ad, the claims made in this ad about forcing schools to teach this and that are patently false. But more importantly, the values that parents want to pass on to their children are taught at home.
How about that, Mr. Conley? He
Sure.
just used the expression patently false.
I think it's interesting that you can't have just a disagreement without calling someone a liar. And the fact that the newspaper has said something not to be true when we look at these so-called nonpartisan fact-finding is, again, I think very naive. 1999, the superintendent of the year in the state of Maine was Dr. Gerald Clockedahl. And Dr. Clockedahl has said that there is no question in his mind that the core curriculum will be affected, the common core curriculum. He talks about local control. That's the very thing that we're concerned about, that if you have a major policy shift like this, it's going to make its way into the learning standards when you talk about what's taught in schools about family, what's talking about human sexuality and all these issues. So again, I don't believe that Dr. Gerald Clockedahl is a liar. I don't think I'm a liar. I don't think the Parkers are a liar. You cannot deny the fact that these families in Massachusetts were told that they could not take their children out of their classroom because of the law that was passed in 2004 in Massachusetts.
Your chance to respond to that, Mr. McTighe.
Well, sure. Again, I would just say that these are the same claims that they made before, and it's not. You don't have to take my word for it. Again, you can look, you know, in these newspaper columns, these truth tests that have been run on it, and more importantly, you could actually look in the word, you know, hear the words of the person who ran those ads in 2009, the campaign manager for the opposition, the anti-marriage campaign. Then admits himself on camera that these, you know, that these tactics or these claims in that ad are false. That's not me calling you a liar, Carroll. Those are the words of the campaign manager who ran this campaign before and put that exact ad on TV. Local school boards are the ones, again, that set the curriculum for any school to follow. That's something that's not going to change. Voting yes on question 1 isn't going to change what children are taught in schools. Nothing is going to change the fact that core values are taught by their parents at home. And I don't know how you could disagree with the idea that it's the responsibility of all parents to teach their children the morals and values that they want to pass on.
We'll extend this for a few more seconds.
So, Matt, you're saying that core values then aren't taught in school, that morality is not taught? Of course it is. And again, I go back to what Dr. Crocodile has said. Yes, local schools have some control, but core values are established on a statewide level. So it is absolutely true that will have effect, that it has had effect in other states, and it will have effect in Maine. In regard to Mark Muddy, if he really wants to know what Mark Muddy said, all he'd have to do is pick up the telephone and ask. Mark Muddy is a personal friend of mine. Mark has released statements before that those statements that he made on camera when he was talking to his staff was a challenging thing where he had some concerns, and Mark has made statements that he does not believe this should be taught in school and believe that if it passes, it will be taught in school.
Sticking with our format, last word, if you would, Mr. McTighe.
Well, again, I would just tell people to look at the words of that. You want to talk about Mark Muddy? Look at the words of Mark Muddy himself. He said it. It's not my words. These are his words. Or just go, look in the newspaper, look in the Kennebec Journal today, look in the Morning Sentinel, look in the Press Herald, look at the truth tests that go through point by point. But more importantly, don't lose sight of the most important thing here. They could talk all they want about schools and what's taught and what's not. That's set at the local level by school school boards. The fact is, though, parents have to take the responsibility. They have to take the control back into their hands because their children are going to hear things everywhere they go the minute they walk out of the door. It's up to parents to teach those core values at home.
We'll continue to explore, I think, these topics here. Moving on to question 3 now. We want to once again take our cue from the debate that's already happening, frankly, in the TV ads. The claim that legalizing same-sex marriage will have an impact on religious rights of those who oppose it.
People are asking what effect same-sex marriage will have on churches in Maine.
Question 1 says that same-sex couples can get marriage licenses and that churches don't have to perform any weddings that go against their beliefs. This law protects churches' beliefs.
Question 1 means consequences, as has occurred elsewhere, like Vermont.
A lesbian couple sued us for not supporting their gay wedding because of our Christian beliefs. We had to pay $30,000 and can no longer host any weddings at our inn.
Now, our question is about religious freedom. If same-sex couples are allowed to marry in Maine, will churches, businesses, or individuals opposed to same-sex marriage face some sort of potential legal consequences for expressing that belief? And again, please address all of those groups if you can, churches, businesses, and individuals. And we want to begin with Yes on One, Matt McTighe.
Well, as the ad that you just saw, the clip of our ad makes very clear, and the initiative that 105,000 Mainers makes clear, this initiative does 2 things. It allows all loving committed couples to obtain a marriage license, but it also adds in new protections to strengthen religious freedom for churches so that no church or clergy would ever be forced to go against their religious belief, just in case there's any doubt. Now, as for businesses, that's something that's set at, that's a separate law entirely. That's a non-discrimination law that the state of Maine, that the voters of Maine passed in 2005. And it says that if you're open for business, you have to serve everyone. You can't decide who you're selectively going to serve, whether or not you're going to serve somebody based on the color of their skin or their religion or anything else. So that won't change at all based on this vote. Voting yes won't change the fact that that business owners, and there are so many small business owners, this is a small business state here in Maine, most business owners that I know would actually welcome the opportunity to have more business, but those that don't have to follow existing law. And there's been no increase in lawsuits here in Maine since that 2005 law went on the books. I have more faith in the voters of Maine that we can work, any differences that people have, they can work out. Most people are going to go to a business. If the business doesn't want to serve them, they probably will choose to go elsewhere. But the fact is that this is a totally separate law that has nothing to do with question 1.
And Mr. Conley, your chance to answer as well.
Again, Santa Ana, said that if we're not familiar with history, then we're damned to repeat it. And I think that's exactly, we're called fearmongers because we look at states in the District of Columbia, Massachusetts, Vermont, other states where this has occurred, those little stars and the graphics that come up when we talk about people being fined and fired and so on, what do all those states have in common? The redefinition of marriage in every one of those states. And so it's to, I guess the idea about the whole discrimination, just very quickly, if you had a child that you said you were going to take away their license because they were texting. You told them that you had a contract with them. And then that child was caught texting, you know, fined or something like that. And you came back and said, okay, give me your keys after you got caught. And that child said, well, no, it wasn't because of texting. It was because of the distracted driving law. You know, so you say, well, listen, texting may have come along and created that conflict. Sure, that law existed before, but this is distracted driving. You as a parent say, listen, I have with all confidence, I'm taking that away from you because of texting. So you can call me a liar or whatever, but this conflict existed. You're losing your license because of texting.
Well, we probably won't have time for rebuttal and reaction in both our last question and this one, but I want to ask very quickly then, follow up to you, Mr. Conley. Do you think that this is something that is going to be any sort of an impact on churches? Again, Mr. McTighe says there is something specific in this law saying that churches would not suffer any sort of legal consequence if they did not want to perform a marriage.
I do. Again, those that are proposing that we redefine this they don't make the distinction between a wedding ceremony and marriage. And so what about the church that has a counselor on their staff he's a state certified counselor that refuses to give marriage counseling to a gay couple? What about people that want to have wedding anniversary parties? What about those that rent for other purposes like that, if we had a marriage seminar and so on? So to say that it's just about the wedding ceremony shows really a shallowness in regard to what marriage is really about.
And quickly, Mr. McTighe.
Well, I would say that, again, I think for most people, the idea of, you know, their faith is rooted in their churches and their church's teaching. And so if, you know, I myself am a Catholic, if, you know, my church does not recognize same-sex marriages, I wouldn't expect anything to change from this law because it wouldn't, not just because of the First Amendment, but also because of the additional protections that we're adding here. But there are some faiths that wish to recognize marriages, and this law will strengthen religious freedom for them as well. I
want you to discuss this in the context of our last question as well. So let's continue this dialogue. Here's the last question, though. It's a short one, in fact. If someone asks if same-sex marriage is a moral issue, how do you respond? And again, we want to begin with Carroll Conley on the Vote No side. If someone says, is this a moral issue? How do you respond?
Absolutely, it's a moral issue. And we can't hide behind that. As we look at our laws, you know, it's a democracy or a republic with democratic principles. And so nobody is imposing morality, but certainly those of us that stand for biblical marriage and for traditional marriage are saying we're making the case for it. This has existed for so many years, and frankly, it does happen to go beyond one particular Judeo-Christian ethic. But yes, it is. And so there have been benefits to that. And the fact that you're coming from a faith perspective, when we do other things like, you know, social justice and helping the poor. Everybody loves the church when it jumps in and stands for civil rights, but when the church integrates and interjects in something like this, it's like, oh, you can't do that, you can't do that. We think that's very unfair. But again, just because you're coming from a faith perspective doesn't mean you're disqualified any more than if you're not coming from a faith perspective.
And Mr. McTighe, again, if someone says, is there a moral issue here, how do you respond to extending same-sex marriage to same-sex couples, well, extending marriage to same-sex couples?
I think it absolutely is, among many things, a moral issue. And I don't see how it would be moral to deny loving, committed couples who are willing to stand up before their friends and family and make a lifetime commitment to one another. I don't see how it would be moral to deny them the freedom to obtain a civil marriage license from the state. So this law would allow all loving, committed couples to do just that. Anyone would be able to go into their town clerk, obtain that marriage license, have that wedding, stand up before their friends and family, and know what it means to be married in the eyes of their community and in the eyes of the law. Denying that freedom to all Mainers is probably, I would say, is immoral.
And I now ask you both. That concludes the question and answer period of the debate. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and conclude now with closing statements, again, based on our random drawing beforehand. You have 1 minute for a closing statement, Mr. Conley.
Thanks again. And on November 6th, Mainers are going to be making a lot of important decisions. Among those is question 1. And we've been involved in this for 2.5 to 3 years, since 2009, when we were able to successfully repeal this. So we would just say to Mainers out there, hold on. For those of you that want to redefine marriage without regard to people's religious rights or parental rights, and without regard to people that are really concerned about this issue, we say, hold on, you've gone too far. For those of you that know in your hearts that this really isn't what's best. Yes, there is a private aspect of marriage, but there's a public part of it as well. And so that is why the government is saying we need to invest in marriage and promote it and strengthen it. So hold on to those. We know that this is a tough issue, and we know that there are great passions involved in this. We've dealt with it respectfully, but we have to talk about the consequences, and that is why we're asking you to examine those consequences and vote no on question 1.
Thank you so much for your closing statements, Mr. Conley and Mr. McTighe. The nature of our debate, you will have the final word.
Thank you very much. Over the last 2.5 years, we have had more than 250,000 one-on-one conversations with Mainers all over the state, door to door, talking to them about why marriage matters to their family and why it matters to all family. Voting yes on question 1 next Tuesday will allow all loving, committed couples in Maine to have the freedom to marry, the freedom to make that choice, the freedom to know that if they fall in love and are lucky enough to find someone, they could get married to that person here in Maine, in their home state, in their community, and be legally recognized and have that bond that stabilizes all families. We've done so much work to change hearts and minds over the last 2.5 years, and we've seen that more and more people are coming to support the freedom to marry. But all of that work would be for naught if over the next 5 days more people don't continue to volunteer, continue to talk to their friends and family and their neighbors about why marriage matters to them and why voting yes will strengthen all of the families here in Maine and allow everyone the freedom to marry.
Well, thank you so much to both of you for participating in our live debate here. We appreciate your time, and we know you have a very busy few days ahead of you, so thank you so much. And that does conclude our live debate here, a special presentation of News 13 on the question 1 issue. I want to again thank our participants here today. We also want to tell you there is going to be a Senate debate coming up. It's coming up Saturday. It's in Lewiston. It features the 6 candidates for U.S. Senate. You're invited to attend. Doors open Lewiston Middle School, 4 p.m. Debate begins at 5. It'll be live streaming at WGME.com and at PressHerald.com, our media partners, on this debate. And if you miss it, don't worry, you can see it on TV too. That debate will have a special presentation Monday night, 7 p.m. right here on CBS 13. And of course, stay with News 13 all night long on election night. We are your election resource for all things that are having to do with the election coming up on Tuesday. Again, WGME.com and on the air November 6th.